Okay, let's start. And the workshop title is Non-Duality, Education and Democracy. So the common point is non-duality, seen from the from different probably perspective, Dōgen-based perspective or more Indian-based perspectives, I don't know. And then from these two perspectives, Professor Chiara Robbiano will investigate more the topic of education. And I guess that Professor Ouriques will enter more in detail in the topic of democracy and the crisis of democracy in our current time. The first speaker will be Professor Robbiano. Chiara, if you want to start, please, you can share your PowerPoint.
Yes, thank you so much, Enrico, for inviting me. This is very thrilling to be here with you. And this is, I have to say that this is really very much work in progress for me. So it's, I just had a glance at Evandro's slides and they see very sophisticated, look very sophisticated, but mine are really still very much work in progress. Yeah, what I think what it's, are you seeing my slides, by the way, or not?
Your slides and also you on the slides.
You see me, okay, great. Okay, because I can see something completely different. Okay. Yes, so let's see, wait, I have to, okay. So what I will talk about is like, so the little bit of scene setting, which is, well, I guess it's not only my university, but at many universities, there are some issues about polarization, conflicts, mental health issues, and both teachers and students seem not to know what to do, and the solutions who have been proposed don't seem to. Can you hear me?
So, yes, but probably someone entered in Zoom with the microphone on. So please switch the microphone off. Okay, should be fine.
Okay. So I will show you my interpretation of these problems, like some underlying cause, and I will also propose I guess, a vision about education, that it should happen in many communities and where teachers and students subjectify together. So I will quickly show what subjectification is for the philosopher of education, Geert Biesta. But especially then I will suggest that in order to transform our classes in many communities, we will need both to offer students and colleagues frameworks and embodied practices. So for there, we look at Dōgen, and I will look into like 3 concepts, to which I will couple also some embodied practices that we could start doing in our classes. So, and the concepts will be bodymind, decentering, and disorientation. So let's go. Well, this is, I don't know how it is recognizable for you, but sometimes at the University of Utrecht, so not specifically at the Honors College where I'm teaching, but they invite me to help teachers with this thing that students are either too political, or they are too loud, or they want safe spaces. And so it happens that teachers are a bit afraid and they start being a bit defensive, and so maybe they think that they are not equipped to really be educators sometimes, I think. So both they want to, I mean, I think the university, even in our plan, for instance, says that it's working towards a better world, but then they resent students if they want to make education, let's say, relevant and apply what we teach in class to real world problems. So when I see then the strategies that have been or the solution that are on offer, you usually see like counselors for individuals or safe spaces for similar peoples, or something that one needs to do with their body to take a break from their mind, let's say. And even meditation is really seen as something, okay, let's isolate myself and then calm down and not think about the difficult things about the problem, the world. So before I start telling you all kind of my solutions with or without Dōgen, I was wondering if you have if you feel like just 5 minutes, so no more, to start thinking if we are talking, you are also seeing something similar in your classes, whether you are a student or a teacher. So the questions that if you feel like I would like you to like sketch on your, piece of paper or iPad or wherever are these. So what do you think is the subject, let's say the protagonist of education? And what aspects of yourself do you bring to class? And what aspects of themselves do others, like other students, other teachers, bring to class? And do you get to meet these aspects? And in what occasions? Also, what is a class according to you? And do you think it should be safe? And what is safe? Should there be room for social activism in class? And maybe what is social activism? Should there be room for discussing or looking for relevance of education in class? Should we allow students to test or apply the framework or the tools we teach them to what is relevant to them and discuss such applications in class? Should we discuss one respected theory or one interpretation? Or should we encourage students to share the different ways they approach the class material, being explicit about the perspective, like my perspective, be it disciplinary, cultural, personal, from which I approach it, and ask students to also be explicit about their perspective? And then also, should we teach students to carry out a dialogue in class, a call and response dialogue, and not monologues? So have you ever been in a class when there was a conflict, and was it a bad experience? Was it a learning experience? Are you okay for taking like 5 minutes to think about this for yourself?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So at 16, we continue. Okay, I will not ask you to fill in also this one, but again, it's about if you think that these are recognizable for people you know, maybe. It's like in class, I teach and learn with my mind. I leave body experiences at the door. After class, I take my mind to see a therapist. After class, I take my body to the gym. In class, I learn from the book, from the video, from the teacher, which is like YouTube. In class, I ask questions to the teacher, not as a person, but as a carrier of knowledge, giver of grades. If I don't understand, I ask the teacher just to check if my answer is correct. And also, I am a democratic teacher. I always ask my students whether they understood. If they did not, I explain it again. And also, I develop a relation with my students. They are not just student numbers. I try to learn all names by midterm. Okay, this is just a bit funny, but maybe recognizable. Okay, but here. So what I think is that there is like a root problem to all this that maybe can help understand where all this problem come from. And I would like to call them like gaps. I mean, gaps is a bit what we will see that Dōgen calls them, but like separations, disintegrations. So I think we all share actually hidden assumptions about the separation between body and mind, me and others. And also we have habits in class, for instance, that are conducing to even more disintegration between body and mind and me and others. So after reading Dōgen and discussing education with my students as well, I tried to articulate this, this root problem, and then to draw a vision. And so I hope that we can then have a discussion, where you can also take the notes you take to the discussion, the notes you took just before. So Dōgen will help us because he says, do not create gaps. Do not see your body mind as lacking integration with itself or with other beings. Through non-interrupted practice of non-interruption, body, mind, and environment are integrated without leaving gaps or cutting anything off. We will see where he says that. So again, if we have other frameworks, so different from, let's say, Dōgen, we will not be equipped to welcome like questions that are seen as interruptions, like if there are questions about the relevance of education, of the relevance of what exactly we're discussing right now. We are also not equipped to deal with emotions in class, neither our own emotion nor the one of the students, or expression, like if someone dares to say, this hurt me, this word, was offensive or something. So that is also problematic. We don't welcome to see people become real in class, like become real subjects. And also these other frameworks, the frameworks of separation, do not help us to give room for the application of our tools to real world situation. And that is, I think, because if we were disembodied without emotions and only like minds, then those questions and those interruptions and emotion would not occur. So if we are looking at them from the wrong framework, these things are like impossible. There are things that should not happen. And then we are very, very unsettled and we don't know how to deal with them. So this brought me to the, let's say, the vision or the thesis that I would like to argue with the help of Vista, but we will just be very quick about this today, and Dōgen especially. So education should happen in mini communities where embodied teachers and students subjectify together through integrative frameworks and embodied practices. Quickly look at what is subjectification, and then we will try to rethink education through the concept of practice, of continuous practice by Dōgen. So like, I think very often in the, like recently, I've just looked at basically one concept by Dōgen and tried to adapt it to something contemporary. And in this case, it will be the concept of continuous practice from Gyōji. But Vista, so Vista is like a philosopher of education that is, well, I understand that he's quite famous, and he famously says that for education, well, of course, we need qualification, so we teach specific knowledge and we learned it. Also socialization, we discuss like how to function in a certain cultural context. But he stresses very much that this is not enough if we don't help students to subjectify. So to become responsible citizen, to reflect how to make their own choices, also in ways that might not be mainstream, and develop freedom because we give them time to reflect how they relate to the world and how they meet others. Like one of his big examples is the paradox of Eichmann and Rosa Parks. So it's like Eichmann was very well socialized and he just contributed to the final solution because that was what was expected of him. But we tend to respect much more Rosa Parks, who, even if she had been socialized into, well, I need to sit in some places in the buses, she decided not to go along with the socialization she was brought up in, but to decide like how to relate to the world in a being as a subject. She says, the world is calling me and now I decide to stay seated and not to leave my room, my seat to a white person. So this would be a good example of subjectification. So business subjectification involves developing as free, but not freedom as in the supermarket, it says, is the freedom as relatable, relational beings. So free to relate to our context in a way that we think is appropriate when our context, so the world, calls us and says, hey, you, how do you respond to this? So he also talks about, good education is a pointing, so we cannot maybe control what happens, but we need to give pointers that students can connect to the real world and then see what they do with that. So these are, again, some quotes again by Vista. All this, I mean, I just go very quickly, and if you want we can always look at it later in the discussion. So he is very clear that so sometimes I hear when I have discussion with the colleagues from other faculties that they say, yeah, the problem is that some of our teachers don't want to be educators. They just say, I want to be a teacher. Again, this does not happen in my honors college, but at other faculties where people refuse to be educators. But Vista obviously makes the for me obvious point that nobody can teach in a neutral way without transmitting values. So if someone would say, I'm neutral, I'm just standing in front of you and you take notes, well, this person is obviously also giving a lot of content of values. What is the value? How is education? How it is possible? So it's obviously not neutral, but it comes with a lot of assumptions. Okay, so I just hope this is just a thing to say, let's discuss this with our colleagues so that we can find out how we stand about this. Okay, so when I also say that education should happen in mini communities, one clarification is that I really think that this should happen in regular classes. So this is very important for me because one could say, look, we can have, the deal with emotion class or the meditation class, the mindfulness class, and that happens afterwards. But if that happens, then one says, okay, I'm so integrated with my body mind in this class, or I am so empowered and I can talk about my emotions in this place where, for instance, we do, let's say, identity politics and we are among us. But then I run to class and then I always shut up. So this little beings here in class, they have idea, like they want to ask what it is about. They want to ask what other people think of the readings. They bring all of themselves to class, so they don't bring all the mind, but they don't dare to ask other students what is their takes on this. They don't ask to have some time to discuss the relevance. They don't tell each other if someone uses a word that hurts them. They would like to apply the tools to conflict outside, but they don't. So this is to stress. I really want, like in this vision, what I'm telling you about education is not something that should happen at the side, but in regular classes. So in the regular classes, we should promote subjectification and provide tools so that people can really realize we are embedded in a world and we want to do something with this. So this starts with transforming the class into a community of learning where participants are aware of being together as embodied and relational beings with different perspectives and background and open to be transformed by interaction with each other. So this will be we need to introduce, even before we start discussing whatever it is that we are discussing in this class, we need to start with the framework of integration of body, mind, and integration of me and others. And so, of course, the first thing I do is like, is this happening anywhere, just like my silly vision? But no, yeah, it does happen in many places already. So, for instance, think of all the contemplative studies institutes that are. Maybe one of the first was Brown University. So this idea of studying, for instance, neuroscience, psychology, religion, whatever it is that you are studying, both from the third person, like, you know, when you study theories and so on, but also from the first person. So there are learning labs where one can do meditation or Qigong or martial arts and experience whatever it is that they are also studying in the neuroscience, religion, or whatever class. And so this has been there for a while. And now last year, a contemplative studies master's opened in Padova. And a few months ago, a research center for contemplative studies also was founded at Keio University. So things are happening. Then there are courses on flourishing, where you have frameworks where you read about flourishing. For instance, like Marcus Aurelius, Stoicism, something, and then you also do practices. And then there are also other universities where all this is more connected to the social and the ethical part, like Emory University with C-learning and Stanford University. And there are other things that I just put there. So we are in good company. We have Ivy League, excellent university, and also Dōgen. So because now my point is one needs to give, in this case to students, both frameworks and practices. So Dōgen is very explicit on the importance of not creating gaps, kangeki. So, and his gaps, as I was saying, are like what I see close to what I call separation of disintegration. So we should not cut off what is fundamentally non-dual, neither our body mind nor our continuity with others or with the world. So, and the three concepts I will look at, it will be, we don't want to see our body mind as lacking integration within itself. We need to practice to be relational and decentered. So we need to stay connected with ourselves and different others and our place, even if when we think we have failed, and even if and then the third point, even if when it's very disorientating to see that others, even if they are in the same room, they see something completely different. And then we should be also ready to be transformed. So we should not disconnect from others and from the present moment, in the moment of disorientation. Okay. And so today I just looked at the beginning of Gyōji. So Gyōji is, well, I think that really the translation I like better is continuous practice. So it's from practice and keeping the practice. But there are other translations. Well, Nishijima and Cross do conduct and observance, but also they say in the note immediately the maintaining the practice would also be a good translation. Okay, so there are here other things. think it's already quite late. This is some secondary literature. So Gyōji is an attitude of a state of mind of supreme dedication. And so it's not only by meditating that one can practice, but doing anything. And of course, in Gyōji, there are a lot of lives of ancestors and some an attention to the way in which they practiced. And there can be some, to us, sounding very strange looking austerities, like, not sleeping in a bed or something. But there are also things like working in the fields. Okay, so that said, we can start with the first one. So the first framework and the first concept. And for each framework or concept, I have also a little quote. So you're just, if you want to just follow the Japanese, I will just read the translation. I usually like Tanahashi because it's very readable, but in this case, I also put Nishijima and Cross when it sounds a little bit closer to the Japanese. So your continuous practice creates the circle of the way, but of course there are merits in there. So it's because of these merits that the cycle exists. By this practice, Buddha ancestors abide as Buddha ancestor, not abide as Buddha, have Buddha mind and attain Buddha without cutting off or without any interruption. So the first point I want to make from this is that continuous practice creates a continuous uninterrupted circle. And I like to think it also a bit like breathing in and breathing out. But so the stress is here that we are involved in continuous practice with no gaps. So what are the gaps that are not there? I think that there are three kind of like no gaps. So there is never a gap between just behaving and something which is meaningful practice, because everything we do is practice. So one cannot just learn or just teach something, because the whole body, mind, emotions, everything will be involved. So whatever we do, teach, learn, discuss in class, for instance, it's always impactful and it is always an occasion for practice. So no gap, just behaving and practice. But there is also no gap between me, others, and the world, because our practice connects us to other beings. So there is no learning or teaching in isolation, and we always impact the others and the world in the way we teach, for instance, something. Another one is there is no gap, means and ends, and practice and realization, right? Every moment of practice is complete. It is not a means to a different end. So this idea, we cannot discuss this. I see that there are emotions in class, but we need to cover 15 more pages. That would be something really not realizing that every moment is already a complete practice. So if the right response feels the one to stay on this problem here, we should stay there and not thinking that we are doing this towards some other goal. Because of this practice, there are the sun, the moon, and the stars. Because of this practice, there are the great earth and the open sky, body, mind, environs. There are the great element, the 5 skandhas. Continuous practice is not necessarily something people in the world love, but it should be the true place of return for everyone. So also beautiful, this idea, and I think that Heine says it a little bit in a way that sounds a bit magic, as in practice is a cosmic power. But I mean, it's not, and the point is, things are connected, because when we practice, we are connected to our environment. We connect our body with our mind. And in this way is that how our environment becomes more connected. So we are connected in this moment to our teachers. We are connected to everything on earth, or all the elements, and we are connected. All the skandhas are also connected. So again, I cannot just be here with my consciousness and not with my samskaras, or just choose some of them and just leave the other ones at the door. And also it is a practice that makes one realize that we are already at home. So that being in our body and being between sky and earth and between ancestors and future and between all things, that is our home. Okay, so this is when it becomes, people start to laugh, I guess, is that I think that this framework could be enhanced or could be waken up, I don't know, we could make people realize this framework, not just by telling them at the beginning, but really starting the class with 2 minutes of breathing exercises, for instance. And there is this, Vieira is quoting Takuan in this beautiful book that will come out in, I think, 1 month or 2 months for Bloomsbury. And well, of course, if you have read Takuan, you don't need maybe also to reread it here, but there is this idea of casting our mind to our body. And so one could really use it in class as saying, you know, when we're breathing in, we invite the mind to the tanden. And that is like a teacher that I had in class who made students do this breathing. She said, it's like inviting friend to one's home through the front door. So see your belly as the front door and you breathe in there. And then when you breathe out, you invite the mind to spread through the whole body. It's just like you invite your friend to make yourself at home and go anywhere. You don't leave the friend at the front door. So then you could do, you know, 2 minutes of this exercise saying, okay, let's arrive to class and let's do this together. And here, well, I asked my students if I could share their reflection with you. And so they discussed this Qigong workshop. That was what I referred when we did this breathing at the beginning. It was a moment of learning how to connect body and mind. And it was also a moment to rethink the Western vision centered around consciousness. And it is also, this other person, Margot, says, it's like, it's a moment of, it becomes easier to connect to my body and I feel grounded when I start these classes. Also doing that together is bonding. And it's also very nice to have this, to doing that together. This is another, we just can skip this one. This is also another possible breathing exercises to do at the beginning of class. Okay, I think we can also skip this for now. Bistas talks about being embodied a little bit when he quotes from John Dewey. So I think you would agree with this, but it's not that he makes a big deal out of it. Probably it's like more implicit, because he talks about education as cultivation that should also be together with education as existential education. So we just go to the second one, decentering in a place. So when we realize that from our framework that we are relational and we are always in a certain place, so we are not, you know, like hovering or something. We also realize that we don't see things in a normal way or in a universal way, because we see things from somewhere in particular. And recognizing this about myself, I also recognize the need to leave the center to someone else, but also staying present with them when I leave this. Okay, so there are different frameworks that here one can use, but we just keep it. So about the embodied practice here, like this fundamental would be to sit in circle if possible, according to the number of students, so that we all see each other. And we also see that we learn together and that other people can contribute from their own unique perspective. So we also recognize that everyone comes to the same reading, for instance, from a certain position. Could be a disciplinary position, you know, someone is maybe a psychology major and another one is a physics major, but it's more than that. Someone could have a certain embodied practice that they have, like they are a violin player or something, so that could also play a role. Okay, let's go to the second quote by Dōgen. This is always from Gyōji here. Because of the continuous practice of all Buddhas of the past, present, and future, all Buddhas of the past, present, and future are actualized. The effect of such sustained practice is sometimes not hidden. Therefore, you aspire to practice. The effect is sometimes not apparent. Therefore, you may not see, hear, or know it. I understand, or I learn in experience, I think that's much better, that although it is not revealed, it is not hidden. I think this is very beautiful, like seeing that, like we recognize the merit of all other people in our practice. So when we are saying something, we recognize, it would really be beautiful to recognize the teachers who helped us see that, and the students who might really receive it. So sometimes it's very clear where are we coming from, let's say, you know, maybe a role model we have had or an author we have read, but sometimes not. And well, here, this is maybe a side note, but it's good that one could learn in practice to see these hidden connections, even if they are not very apparent. We go on. You may not notice the causal conditions that led you to be engaged in the practice that actualizes you at this very moment of unknowing. Though continuous practice is not limited by the causal condition. Continuous practice that actualizes itself is no other than your continuous practice right now. So again, this is beautiful because it's very important to recognize that we come from somewhere. So this is what you also already said before. So we are here because of multiple causes and conditions in the network of dependent origination. So we are not learning or saying these things in a vacuum or, you know, we just invented from the top of our head. No. So it's good that we realize where we come from, but there is more to practice than this realization. So we need to practice now. So we cannot rely on what we already have or who we are. And so because there is dependent origination, change is possible, right? This is just fundamental teaching of Nagarjuna already. If there is emptiness and nothing is impermanent or independent, then we can act and do what has not been done before, remove suffering, change karma, go on an alternative path. So it is in the now of this practice that the new reality can be manifested. So about embodied practices here, I think that we really need, if we want to recognize the merits or the effects on us of other participants in the room, it's really important to reflect on how we are positioned in the room. So for instance, we should again train not to disconnect when we have spoken and realize and teach the importance of listening. So here I thank Masaki Matsubara for his presentation when he showed us this dynamics between the shite and the waki. So the presenter in class could be like the protagonist of no theater, but then it's always good when we have a presentation, for instance, student presentation, to always appoint a student as a waki, as a supporting actor or a guest. So the speaker will occupy a certain position, meant for the host, let's say, and then we appointed the official listener that will be the you, right? So now we added the second person as well. Right, so here we have the official speaker and the official listener. This is also some student reflection, and Violetta also said that I could use a picture of her. Talking about how she said, I'm always very, very active in class and I always speak, but now I'm really learning to become a listener and also listen and stay connected when someone says something I don't agree and when something that is a bit different and difficult according to my background. So observe identities that once felt entirely disconnected from my own. Okay, so this was also nice. Okay. And as a little bit, another little quote about 2, so then we can go to 3. This being so, your continuous practice of this day is a seed of all Buddhas and the practice of all Buddhas. All Buddhas are actualized and sustained by your continuous practice. By not sustaining your continuous practice, you would be excluding Buddhas, not nurturing Buddhas, excluding continuous practice, not being born and dying simultaneously with all Buddhas, and not studying and practicing with all Buddhas. Blossoms opening and leaves falling now are the actualization of continuous practice. So again, practice always involves others, and we are the fruit of seeds and the seeds of fruit. If we exclude others, we create gaps. And then also nice that our role model can also be the blossoms and the leaves. They are perfectly integrated with other being, and they can shift from being born to dying, blossoming and falling without interrupting their continuous practice of integration with their context. So, but then it's like, should we come to class with all our blossomings and falling, right? That is a big question. So shouldn't we allow for some gaps, from bracketing something when it becomes too painful or too political or too personal? But then the answer would be no, we should just keep them and embrace disorientation, which is the third and last concept. So here, because there is no normal way to occupy a space, we should not normalize our orientation. We have to accept that it is disorientating to realize that others are in different worlds and see different things or are hurt by different things. But to embrace disorientation means to really welcome in our class both what is normal, like, with scare quotes, so that is what we have been socialized into, and what is non-normal or marginal or different or non-mainstream, both in ourselves and others. So because being interdependent and transformable, if we can integrate different aspects of all of us in a community and stay in dialogue with each other, then we can really, let's say, heal together. And reintegrating this integration, which does not mean that we all agree, because, also the little figures, you can see them, they are not all happy, but now they dare to speak out and to say the things that, so the one who was afraid about the conflict and still very preoccupied still is, but says the conflict outside is horrifying, but luckily this class gives me tools and framework to find my own position toward it, even if my position is not mainstream, and to have a nuanced discussion, which is difficult to have outside. So this other person also, who was hiding behind the mask, now says, I come with all the aspects of me, and now because we care for each other and we value different contributions, then I'm not afraid to grow and change together. And the green one on the right says, some of the embodied practices we do together are very disorientating, but feeling silly together allows us to playfully bond, to remove barriers, and then to think together. So, I can imagine that for some of us to start a class with breathing exercise, it would bring us and many students out of our comfort zone. But that could be good if we address it at, let's be silly together, a little bit more playful. Let's, skip this seriousness that we always need to carry with us. Then maybe we will also go deeper in our discussion. Okay, we skip this one. Gistas is happy about interruptions, says that good education should be interruptive. And I see there a very big relation to this disorientation and giving the time to do something with disorientation. This is also, another student reflection who says that the embodied practices feel a bit odd, but they help him to be together in class. And now the last Dōgen quote, polishing a mirror or breaking a mirror is no other than this practice. Even if you might try to ignore it in order to hide the crooked intention and escape from it, this ignoring would also be continuous practice. To go off there and there looking for continuous practice appears similar to the aspiration for it. But it is like leaving behind the treasure at the home of your true parent and wandering poor in another land. Wandering through wind and water at the risk of your life, you should not discard the treasure of your own parent. While you were searching in this way, the Dharma treasure would be missed. This being so, continuous practice should not slacken, even for a moment. So I take this again to let's not condemn any moment of practice. There can be different moments, right? But also practice also involves responding to what we might regard as a failure or difficulty or moments of disorientation. Also says that even if we try to hide this moment of disorientation, we are still working on them. But if we reject them, it's like disconnecting from them and from disorientation without learning from it. So this would be the practice, that would be the choice of some teacher who says, I ignore this in order to focus on something else. But Dōgen would say, it's just looking for something that's already in your pocket. So why making effort to cut out our body's emotion and experience from our class? Why trying to disentangle me from others instead of closing the distance? Why sterilizing our classroom from emotions, politics, experience, and activism? So practice can take its cue from everything. It is self-transformation and world transformation. Take everything as practice and allow students to practice what we point at on anything. And this is a silly embodied practice that I have done actually in 3 different occasions, and it was really funny. So it's like, for instance, sometimes I ask students to work in pairs to an assignment, and that is very disorientating because they are really used to work like to, for instance, write a paper on their own. But how to, make them break the ice with each other and also realize what it means that they will need to both lead and follow. So, and there are some of these exercises where you can start with saying you connect your fingers, and one is leading and the other one is following. But then at some point, you do that both are leaders and followers, and it's not expressed like with words, who is that one. But then you will just discover that you can respond even if without having agreed who is the leader, who is the follower. So, and then there is another one, and actually this is not my drawing, this is my daughter, so I will give her the credits. She drew that when she was very distressed, and so that gave me also the idea that when students are very distressed, for instance, you see that there is a new topic, it could even be, the Buddhist no self or something. They are very, very like, oh no, I want the self, what is this? Then maybe to give them, 5 minutes to draw or to journal. To come to terms with the emotions that the topic under discussion has raised, that could be an idea. Then there are also other strategies that we now don't go to. So this is already the conclusion, and that is that, so education as happening in mini communities of learning where embodied teachers and students subjectify together through integrative frameworks and embodied practices. So this is the proposal or the vision. And we have looked at it through Dōgen's framework that has helped us to rethink education as continuous practice. So continuous because everything we do, teach or learn is practice. It involves the whole body mind. It impacts others, it changes the world, and it's happening right now. Then we looked at these 3 frameworks and practices. Integrating body mind between earth and sky, education so cannot pretend to live outside bodies and emotions, others and the world. And yet continuous effort is needed to integrate or close the gap, close the distance between body, mind, me, others, me, environment. And also to make us and others feel at home. And breathing practices might help. Then we looked at decentering. So to remind us that we are positioned, we don't see things in a neutral way. We need to be intellectually humble, leave the center to others at the right time, listen to them, see from their eyes. So we need to reflect on how we sit in class, and we need to train to listen as hard as training people to speak. And we recognize causes and conditions that led to our position, could be our disciplinary grounding or something else, because we are part of visible and hidden communities. But it is also important that we learn that part of decentering is being ready to manifest our traditions in new ways, attuned to the now. And the third one we saw was embracing disorientation. So we welcome framework and practices that help us rethink who we are and to change our ingrained habits. And responding to disorientating experiences, polishing and breaking mirrors, playfully bonding together without disconnecting is the point. So we provide tools, we should provide tools to face disorientation and time, for instance, to draw difficult concepts or situations, and time to connect to each other before collaborating. So daring to change together in the now of continuous practice. And then if all happens, this happens, then we could have this kind of class. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. Then I think we can go on to Evandro presentation, and then we can use time at the end for discussions and questions.
Thank you very much, Jean, for this tremendous, marvelous work. Fernando Ferrari, for your love, and Enrico, for your work, for your his kindness. characterize you. Chiara, I'm very glad, as I said to you, to be here with you. Very beautiful, your work. Congratulations. I'm very interested experience. Let me talk now about experience of social activist and a professor during the last 45 years. What drives me to dedicate myself to contributing to a bridge between Western and Indian, Japanese philosophies can be summarized as follows. I have dedicated and still dedicate my life to experience and studying the effectiveness and improvement of this effectiveness of the most diverse types of movements for transforming society, committed to more social justice, more respect for difference, more economic equity, more sustainability, more democracy, more spirituality. And I only found a constant datum, the tendency of human beings of goodwill, including myself, to be frequently captured by the same values, by the same mental states, which they say they want to overcome in the dimension they call social. In other words, I was struck by the tendency to be unconsciously crossed by a discourse that makes interventions in territories often generate what we want to avoid with such interventions, generation a loss of trust. In one way or another, I understand that these and others different modes of suffering can be understood as the breaking of the experience of communication. What is democracy, for example, if not the attempt to promote more understanding, more balance, more equanimity, more communication among difference? That's why I dedicate myself to education that improves a transformational pragmatics of suffering existence. The basic problem, the root problem of democracy is that an abstract entity, the state, is expected to be capable of stopping the intentions of groups that want to prevail over others. And why is this problem? Because the state does not actually exist in itself. It's a network of human beings who outside of it are convinced, because they were educated by hegemonic social theory and philosophy, of the impossibility of self-regulation. To overcome our education, that's Chiara is right when she told us about that is a contemplative way. We need a pragmatic transformation of existence capable of bursting the bubble of the mentality of hate, which produces another as an absolute externality. This is why I coined in 2009 the concept mental territory, which absolutely synchronizes with the Indian and Kyoto school understand of the role of the mind in qualifying the life that human beings live. That's why I am grateful here to study and continue to contribute to a therapeutic mental education ontological based on non-duality. The brain circuit is not abstract. They are concrete, as we thought in a dualistic way. But the medicine, the psychiatric medicine, can change the attitude of a person through drugs. Drugs are concrete, and they activated and don't activate some structures of the brain, and then the attitudes of the persons change. Then the subjectivity in reality is not subjectivity, but is why this subjectivity produces what you call objectivity. Because we are, our relation with reality is mediated by our mind. We are our mind. We inhabited our mind. We designed, created the world with our mind. We dream, we love, we read, we create. Since the point of view, since our mental territory. Since the mental territory, we live. We stand up and go to the world. We are what we imagine that we are, and the world is. We need a way of perceiving, feeling, thinking that allows us to give a loving hand that is an emancipatory, soteriological mental path to our own inner child, to those who arrive in this world, to all of us who are together in this world. And this at every moment of tension, as we are not idealists. As you know, the transformational pragmatics of suffering existence is exactly what characterizes Eastern philosophy, which deals pragmatically as a culture of mental cultivation, with a set of knowledge founded not on speculations, but on pragmatic disciplines of subordination of the ego and acceptance of a principle of meta-subjective authority, as is the communication condition of human being. This is very clear in the tradition of philosophical anthropology and anthropobiology, without falling, of course, into the mistakes of Gerling and his reactionary institutionalism based on the most complete pragmatism, but rather following, for example, the philosophical anthropobiology of Jacques Poulain, which privileged dialogue and the shared judgment of truth. Human beings is always hunger of truth. The studies of Dutch anatomist Louis Bogue on human neoteny demonstrate that from a morphological point of view, human being is an animal without any type of specialization, and therefore a being full of primitivism in relation to higher mammals. Cold deficiencies at birth, which make his skin one of the most inadequate in the kingdom animal, lack of attack organs for its defense, lack of bodies specialized in flight, primitive dentition, indeterminate structure at the level of the jaw, which cannot be classified as either herbivorous or carnivorous, loss of pigmentation in the hair, eyes, and the skin, etc. Finally, says Bull, accepting the comparison with the great apes, man is an irremediable, maladjusted being. So human ontogenesis occupies a special place in the world of vertebrates because its dependency on others and environment is absolute. That's why human being depends on listening to the mother's voice, the father's voice, the fraternal voice, and the voices that perform these functions in order to make the world speak in a favorable way to him. The human being, as the tradition of philosophical anthropology shows, is a creature of needs, and he realizes that he is obliged to intervene in everything that manifests itself around him to achieve what he is not endowed with. It is, therefore, a process in which a human being depends in turn of knowing what she needs and knowing how to make their peers and the similar speak to him, her, that is, moving her direction, so that she can obtain what they need to survive and to live. Human being is delicate, fragile. We emerge into this world within the other. We are with each other. Only the hegemonic social theory and philosophy that reiterates the primary duality make us forget this real, concrete fact. Our condition is communication. Always connected. Social networks are a simulacra of this communicational reality. Extreme fragility of human being when we are born still as fetuses demands that we establish ourselves as singularity, as difference in our communication with our mother, with our father, with those who perform for us the mother function, the father function, the fraternal function. As I said, we differ only in the simultaneous, no dualistic experience of similarity. The coincidentia oppositorum, the coincidence of oppositors, becomes the foundation of all human life, said to us Nishida Kitarō. And its perfection is shown according to the pattern of love. In other words, it is an extremely logical concept, but in actual life, it becomes an extremely intimated reality. That is our condition. With every breath, we depend on judging what we feel, what we think, what our mother, our father, our brother, sister, friends, persons feel, think, to be able to make the world speak in a favorable way to us. This is the human figure of happiness. This is why the mental state of security and protection is the mental predisposition of human being in our need to re-experience the unremitting movement of codependent origination and solidarity, and thus no dual cooperation among all entities. That is our condition. Chiara told us that the appliance of embodied practice in class depends, after the need of defined subject in the class, of a third question that just is, it be safe? Chiara told us also about arousing the desire in another human being for wanting to exist in and with the world in a grow-up way. The communicational conditional of human being, I say, offers itself like a mini community with big consequence for the world. We seek experience of this mental state, whether they are true or simulated, even if such simulations imply a state of collective dementia, as in autoritarisms that have emerged everywhere and have taken by surprise the hegemonic social theory and philosophy that are, in general, disoriented due to its ontological and epistemological basis that reiterates the primary duality and thus reiterates the division, the fragmentation of what they want to bring together with democracy, sustainability, social justice, respect for difference, etc. The communication condition of a human being, paraphrasing Gabriel Tarde's elementary social fact, is the elementary psychopolitical fact, the truly explanatory fact, because that's where one is surprised, the living surprise, where the real movements take place, that is, the acts of human beings in relation to others, and the acts of all beings driving by the will to live, by the Spinozian conatus, what he calls the first reality of our existence, this implacable reform of self-preservation, homeostatic and spiritual at the same time, present in any being, for example, that is the common. For the common is what it is with. It is through interaction with Jacques Foulin, which began in 2030, that I am carrying out my current research in the pragmatic philosophy sector of the Paris 8 Department of Philosophy Research that brought me to India and Japan. This question brings us Pierre Hadot, His recurring theme is that the characteristic of philosophy is, as you know, a series of spiritual exercises designed to transform the perception and therefore the being of those who practice them. The Eastern philosophers as a whole is exactly a form of the Eastern philosophies as a whole is exactly a form of being, precisely a concrete way of seeing, as the Indian terms pana, nana, and na make explicit. It's a pragmatic philosophy based on the guru-shishya relationship. The figure of the sage invites us to totally transform our perception of the world. In this sense, we can say that philosophy taught in universities today is, for the most part, a distortion of its original therapeutic impulse as an emancipatory discipline, a therapeutic discipline, I would say, in which being and thinking, truth and happiness are reconciled. It is worth remembering Martin Heidegger and again, though, since the revisitation of the matrix contest of ancient Greece sought to rescue in a severe setback for Hegel's narrative and his apology of Western modern reason as the evolutionary climax of the dialectic of history, a dimension of the original functionality of reason, logos, as a united instance of beings. In recent years, I have been supporting a third structure of truth based precisely on the communicational condition of human being, constituted as it is by the mental state of security and protection in the incessant movement, as I told, of dependent coordination and solidarity, and thus no dual of cooperation of all entities. And how the psychopolitical emancipation, therefore, of psyches and networks of psyches, the institutions, therefore in agreement with the Gabriel Tarde and disagreeing with the Durkheim, depends on whether the therapeutic requalification of the capacity of judge as this mental state of security and protection as a reference. Let's see in a little more detail. According to the Lipilondo, while reason in the West is institutive, a positive discourse on reality that wants to say what it is or should be making suffer, I say, those who think that way given the mental afflictions to be born and die without control, Indian philosophical reason has a taste of honey because it clarifies what reality is not. And that is why I bring it closer to pre-Socratic philosophy, especially Heraclitus of Ephesus, and his listening to Aletheia, to truth as reality, as an objective descriptive state, as well as approaching the Kyoto school. In this sense, the very essence of the Vedas is called Madhu, that is, the doctrine of honey. As you know, the Vedas comprise a double division in terms of functionality, operability, and teleology. Karmakanda, the section related to action, and Dinandakanda, the section concerning ontological knowledge. This second section fundamentally comprises the Upanishads, whose philosophical tradition that systematizes their teachings is Vedanta, and they, as you know, and they propose a radical reflection on the foundations of all human action, and more specifically, on the duality that is inherent to it, marked by an alleged substantiality and or independent existence of the subject in relation to the object and vice versa. The Mahayana Buddhism describes the ignorance as a singular process of superimposition in which the human being makes one think appear with the properties of another, as occurs exactly with the fake news process, thus configuring a fake mind algorithmically exponentiated, destructing democracy. Ignorance is eliminated through the realization of the fundamental uniqueness, unit without uniformity, that overcome the fragmentation experience, for example, in hegemonic West, of the no duality that underlines the primary duality as a condition for the possibility of any and all human experience. This occurs because of the objective of this reason with the flavor of honey, when listening to the truth as the reality, as aletheia, with a listening ear of those who belong to it, is to dispel the errors of knowledge of human being in their common sense. The reason in Indian philosophy, especially that of the Hindu traditions of Vedanta and the Buddhist traditions of Mahayana, is neither speculative or restrictive to a diagnosis or to a cultural critic, but rather aims to lead the human being to the existential wisdom and happiness, since it is as being there in emptiness, hanging on nothingness. And thus, tension between the anguish provoked by ignorance in relation to the constitutive experience of multiplicity and transience, and the therapeutic, therefore clinical, psychopolitical requalification of the capacity to judge. In other words, the psychopolitical emancipation or the soteriological objective depends on a refined hermeneutics of the mental territory, a delicate archaeological drilling of the territory where, in fact, we find ourselves, which allows the return of the human being when he is in a certain misery, like a baby again, to a state of health, understood here as the capacity to live the common experience of strength, vitality, and flourish. What depends, I say, on the experience of truth, on a transvalued, no metaphysical, no postmodern truth, therefore of a communicational nature. This requalification demands, I agree with Nietzsche on this crucial point, a medicine of culture, a medical philosophy, physio-psychological. Therefore, as I said here, the dialogue depends on a respiratory thought. What I sustain in a long clinical conversation I have, what happens thanks to my marriage with Professora Estelita with the yoga and yoga therapy. It is the exercise of taking care of our desire, in a way, the deepening and systematization of what Foucault saw at the end of his life when affirming the importance of self-care. The no-dualistic Indian philosophical exercise of analytical discernment of the real is opposed both to Western anti-rationalism and to the resulting and mistaken forms of meditation, which promulgate that it would be possible to reach advanced states of no-duality consciousness by despising the mind. The reason in the case with the flavor of honey and not institutive, as I said, is at the heart of Indian philosophy, and perhaps I am studying at Kyoto School. It's only the analytical discernment of the real that indicates in advance the clue, as Kamashila shows, in which the teaching of the master, the one who is in the place of transference, as our favorite authors, and the reflection embarked upon with him are prepared to be and then can be realized through meditation. In a certain sense, contemplation, as in Simone Weil, in which the human being experiences when he emerges from the rebirth, from the depths, with great health and with a second more dangerous innocence, like the Nietzsche told, the state of prima, of loving union. Schumann synthesizes, for the early Buddhist tradition, philosophy was not an integral part of meditation, but even the acme of meditative practice. It is in the same way and in the same sense that the human being frees itself from conforming to the suffering of accepting his own life without any meaning or justification, which implies, as many who follow the institutive reason think, rejecting the need of any and all forms of salvation, redemption, or therapy. If there are those who defend that Nietzsche's therapy will be configured essentially as a therapy of the therapy itself, the clinical psychopolitical therapeutic process as I conducted, based on the communicational condition of human being, and that talks widely with Heractus Aletheia, the philosophical anthropobiology and the reason with flavor of honey, allows to overcome the ineffectiveness and the secondary effects of many previous therapies. But mainly, and at a deeper level, allows the elimination of the desolation and helplessness of those who are convinced of the need to eliminate their own need for any and all forms of therapy in the face of the insurmountable suffering generated, as I said earlier, by rebelling against the reality of being born and dying without control, against the reality of failing and get up, giving thanks and celebrating life. It's not by chance that the conformism in relation to the suffering to which the institutive reason leads also emerges in the fact, as you know, that violence was long been understood in Western philosophy as a fundamental aspect of the human condition, for example, in terms of both to the relationship between sovereignty and war, in terms of its use for revolutionary purposes, and that perhaps from 1921, with Benjamin's critique of violence, it became the subject, violence became the subject of explicit questioning by subsequent thinkers in that century, and in this present century, in the last century, in the present century, such as Agamben, Arendt, Benjamin, Butler, Castoriadis, Derrida, Fanon, Gramsci, Merleau-Ponty, Sartre, involving the most diverse fields of knowledge. Such reflections are generally organized around two main conceptual axes. First, the fact that violence cannot be reduced to war or its physical form. And secondly, that violence is constitutive of intersubjective relations, institutions, language, logic, and subjectivity, because contrary to being a local and contingent phenomenon, it is a ubiquitous aspect, and therefore not only repressive and negative, but even necessary and creative, it's claimed, of the human condition. However, the rise of totalitarianism of plutocracies in our century raises the question of how one can know that a given violence is creative or destructive. Otherwise, the suffering imposed by it adds to the torrent of sufferings already known and that feeded resentment characteristic of the hegemonic West. We thus return to the place from which the hegemonic West has had, has, and will have immense difficulty to live in it, that of truth. In this case, that of a therapy based on truth, which pulsates in the communicational condition of the human being as an unfold of the communication condition of reality, its no-duality condition. The fact is that we have incorporated 24 centuries of dualism since Aristotle is consummated with his hyper-paradigm, because he led to the sophistic Platonic classical paradigm, classical Greek philosophy. And he did so against the no-dual ontology of the pre-Socratics. I think of Heraclitus, born, as we know, in the Greek colonies of Asia Minor, out of everyday human experience, and not out of mythical tradition. Thus, Aristotle founded classical Greek philosophy with the historical structure of the real. The structure of classical metaphysics there would be, as we exhaustively know, a real outside of the human being that would have to know its truth through representation and adapt to it, to this absolute order. As a decisive reaction to the danger of this structure, easily captured by the priest and the sovereign, by every spokesman from for the outside, we also know the postmoderns went to the opposite dualistic pole. And so each human being himself became the center of the world to create their own truth, brought important achievements, of course. But we also brought together the impossibility of escaping the post-truth, the post-human, the post-history, and find the common, having ended, despite the immense achievements, I repeat, that are lowered by strengthening the narrow liberal project and the mental pandemic of the war of micro-narratives, in which those who sell are the strongest, and with which the corresponding fragmentation reached its present climax. Overcome those two structures of truth produced by the dualistic ontology and epistemology compromise with the primary duality meta-narratives against micro narratives, demands an important effort to critically observe the flow of mental states that emerged when listening to the possibility of a third structure of truth founded on no duality. These call for a careful visit to the internal museum, which displays the mental states that were absorbed and continue to be reinforced in the cultural formation in which the human being emerged, that is, in the psychopolitical apparatuses of culture in which he emerged, and that each one uses as a reference for the capacity to judge, which is, as you know, the properly human capacity, because thinking is common to all, because to do is to think. Brain circuitry comes, as neuroscience proves, to reflect morphologically what you do. Nietzsche established in his later work the need not for the disappearance of foundations, but the need to depart in a transvaluation of what is presented by the metaphysical tradition as absolute, as the ideal man, from foundations different from those that until then prevailed by whole millennia of mankind. In his own words, I do not deny as evident that many actions called unethical must be avoided and fought, and so also that many called ethics must be realized and pursued. However, I think that in both cases, we should start from fundamentals different from those that existed until now. And he concludes his aphorism 103 by stating, we must change our way of seeing to arrive finally, perhaps too late, to change our way of feeling. The communicational condition of human beings, so the elementary psychopolitical fact concept with which I seek to advance toward understanding of what we call it an elementary social fact that allows me to stand a third structure of truth. This is a schema, a diagram of this historical structure of reality, of truth. So there is a real outside the subject that has a fundament, that has a cause. It's not loose, not adrift. Real has its truth within itself, because it founded it. And in front of the real, the subject realizes the process of representation, a good representation, guaranteed by a good method, allows you to harvest the fruit, which is the truth. The problem is that is this empty space demand forms of priests and sovereigns. The postmodern structure that is a real made of virtuals which simulates a reality. These simulations come from demand, the market, consumption, and are based not on a fundament, but on a regime of effectiveness, of efficacies. This regime produces simulacra that which replace the truth. The problem is that post-truth emerges here, fake news emerges here. Here is the place of what I call a fake mind. The communication condition of the human being binds philosophy of communication, human life, physics, and truth, because it allows revealing the foundations of an existential praxis that involves all the aspects of a human being's life, understood it as embodied in the relationships that everyone lives with anybody and everything. The third structure, that is a work in progress, of course, is that in the real, the human being is the limit of the real. There is no gap as there is no gaps, no separation, no disintegration, as Chiara told us. The source of reference to our attitudes, for our actors, for our are the mental state that I'm perceiving that is offering itself like a source of reference for my action is its quality is from the quality of the security of protection. So, if what I'm thinking, what I wanted to do, will promote more security and protection, that is truth. I want to conclude for today with Kitarō Nishida. From parental and conjugal love, develops the love between friends. Thank you again for being here. I feel like being among friends. And from the love between friends, it advances to the love of humanity. Love is the supreme moment of knowledge. And I understand that love is the other name of democracy, of education, of emancipation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Evandro. I think we can use at least 15 minutes, the maximum, maybe 30 minutes. Or minutes to discussion question we need.
Turn on the lights, or is it okay?
Oh, yes, we can. Good idea. Wait, and first, I would ask if you have some comments or if you would add Evandro's presentation as Evandro quoted you some lessons. And if you want to correspond somehow. Okay, you. She's drinking. Chiara.
I now hear, I don't hear very well because I think that now maybe the microphone is Evandro's microphone.
Oh,
So
okay. So there is something today that the volume of voices is a little bit low, but I don't know how to change it. So, Chiara, if you want to comment Evandro's talk or say something.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Yes, no, it was very, very interesting. And I had like, well, many things are very, very important and nice, but I really had a question about, at some point, Evandro, you mentioned the clinical psychopolitical therapeutic process that you conduct. And so I was really curious about how do you do that? When do you do that? Is it something you do in class, or is something that you do like, yeah, what is like the concrete practice that you, in which these beautiful ideas of non-duality manifest themselves in your own either daily life or teaching or something else?
Thank you for your question. The first step in the psychopolitical clinic, because there is a problem with psychopolitics, no? Because I began to work with psychopolitics about the beginning of the 20s, and then in psychopolitics since 2014, with the work of, especially the work of Jung, began to be understood as the way by what the neoliberalism produce power over minds. No? That's another mistake, because the problem is not the psychopolitics is not a new language. Is the more ancient language of humanity. The same language that was studied and discovered and is offered to us by the philosophies of Eastern philosophies, for example. Mind decides what we experience. No? That's very, very important. I don't talk about this, but the works of, for example, of Foucault, Deleuze, Guattari, Derrida, Lazzarato, no, pointed in this direction when Lazzarato told us about politics of mind. But they insist, like Bernard Stiegler, that the power dominated the mind of the persons. But they don't understand that the domination of the other, it depends on the predisposition of the other to be dominated. That's the problem. When in the end of the 19th century, the discussion between Gabriel Tarde and Durkheim it has been very important and decisive to this blindness of the social theory and philosophy hegemonic in West. Why? Because Gabriel Tard told us, briefly talking about it, that there is don't exist a society. What exists is a intermental psychology. Durkheim, in resume, told us that exists a society that is over us, over the individuals, and determines the individuals. The position of Durkheim became, as you know, a canon of social theory. No? But the position of Gabriel Tard becomes a canon not of the social theory, but of propaganda and publicity. When you study propaganda and publicity from the beginning of the last century, no, when these theories was created in the United States, you will see a very different position from Durkheim, because the propaganda and publicity are specialists in public opinion and individual opinion. How you can produce your opinion to sell your product or sell your ideology. No? For example, the same first centuries, first decades of last century, it was created the theory of public relations. No? That is a very, very important. But so the first clinical, psychopolitical clinic, the first step is to help the person to understood that there is no enemy, because everybody that enters in a clinical process, and we do this in our everyday, we have in the narrative of the persons, always there is a person, an enemy. No, my wife, my daughter, my father, history, my class, my gender, my body, my history, my family, my money, my appearance, my hands, my absence of hair, my age, the opportunities, the persons that don't understand me. No, all the people always have an enemy. That's the problem. The first step is very, very hard step, is to show to the person that the problem is not the person or the situation that she calls an enemy. The problem is the feridas. Wounds. The problem is the wounds that the person and the situation touch in the person. That is the problem.
So, Evandro, and also, if I understand your talk, according to Chiara's question, so on the one side, your praxis in order to dismantle this kind of structure is to study, to make philosophy, if I understood, as you do, and to give a lecture and try to persuade as many people as possible with this third kind of truth. But also there is probably psychoanalytical praxis, as you probably mentioned, or also, for example, yoga practice, as you mentioned. For am I wrong, or could be said?
We the most important thing I consider is that we must understand what we feel and what we think about ourselves and about the other and the world. So we are philosophers. That is why philosophy don't have any importance in our world in this phase of humanity, because there is only one philosophy that wants to be the ultimate reality. And the social theory and the hegemonic social theory and philosophy does narrow, a very dangerous, a tragic error, because they abandon religion after understand what religion is saying, talking to us. Religion is talking to us about the sense of life. That's the problem. So the social theory and, for example, political economics. There is my enemy is the upper class. If there is no upper class, there is no problem. That's oh God. The social, the cultural studies, for example, we must insist in the indifference. That's very, very important, very important. But the problem, the result is we are not achieving, we are not capable to achieve the common. We have produced disintegration, no? Including immense and tremendous fights inside the different identities, no? So the first step, Chiara, of this process, no? Of this process is to try to show to the person that we cannot control what happens, but we can control our reaction in front of what happens. That is what I understand as the no-duality applied to politics and to therapy.
Jim?
Yes, I think both of the talks today were a lot to process in a short amount of time. So my question may be a little naive, but when I listen to Chiara's rather optimistic plan for classroom therapy, for curing education by transforming the classroom to enhance the individual and to enhance social relations. And then I listened to to your description, and all of a sudden that began to look more and more like an illusion. And so I began to think back to my own education. How to put it? There were only very few teachers that inspired me. Sometimes years without an inspiring teacher, but very few in grammar school, high school, and university. Very few. Most of them were simply uninspiring. Some of them had a negative impact, but very few were inspiring. And I don't think there's any way to create a generation of inspiring teachers. That's a gift. We can't control that by pedagogical education. But the reason they were inspiring was that if I have to look for one reason, it's because they taught me how to learn. So if self-education, to teach a person how to educate themselves for life with the goal of education, then the classroom model, the school model, which functions at the basis of a lowest common denominator, is violent. I mean, it works against that principle. So you progress from year to year, you have certification by objective norms, you have a separation of disciplines, and you have a balanced diet for 12 years with no gluttony and no starvation. This is everything that was wrong with my education and everything that was right. I'm not saying it didn't take place sometimes in the classroom, but the classroom was by and large an impediment. And I think also, not just for me, but I had a classmate who was a biochemist who later became a vice president of Fudan University and a world-class biochemist. And my presence in the laboratory held him back, the presence of others like us. He couldn't advance because the teacher had to make the class available to all of us and grade us all together. So I feel that everything that you're talking about is contradicted by the very system that you're trying to fix. And I think this not as some original idea, but these are thoughts that have been in my mind since I read Paulo Freire in the 1960s.
I was going to talk about Paulo Freire.
Okay,
But I think Chiara had something first. Yeah. I've been thinking about Paulo Freire for the last 2 hours. So.
Jim, thank you for reminiscing about your own education, which also, I think, helps me to stress a very important point that I've heard that as well, right? I've heard it from some of my colleagues or my director of education sometimes saying, yeah, but you and that one, you have the gift. So you cannot teach it to other people, just stop it, just be the best of yourself. But that's not something you can give to us. But okay, but that's not, you are suggesting that there is one direction between the teacher and a student. So the teacher gives you tools and then you learn and all that. But what I am saying is that if we have a class, let's say of 25 people, and they all have different experiences and we all do the same readings, I think that we as teacher, but also students can learn from all these people. So let's say that I am a mediocre teacher and I just, I'm just good at selecting readings because I'm smart enough. But for the rest, I have really very lousy personality or I'm too shy. But still, I mean, we have this beautiful reading in the middle. And now we have 25 smart people with all different backgrounds who can talk about it. And maybe, I'm not inspiring, but there are 3 people in the classroom that are inspiring to these other 3, but not to the other 4 and so on.
Yes.
So my idea is let's not make it all the teacher infuses either knowledge or tools, as you were describing, to the teachers, and the other students are just stopping, for instance, the good students from going forward. Because if someone looks at the reading as an excellent biochemical student, but they never cooked, and maybe there is a cook who knows about chemistry in another way, the intervention of the cook student could really help another student to understand something better. But the very smart biochemical mind maybe is going to say, oh, wait a second, the things that I understand in abstraction so well, it's also what happens when I cook an egg or something. And wow, and then things happen. So I think that
I think what you're doing is making the best of a situation that is fundamentally dysfunctional. And I applaud that because it's unrealistic to think of an education system that would promote self-education. I think it's very unrealistic. But the fact is, that's the way we actually learn. So the system is flawed, but I think what you're doing is creative in making the best of it, and perhaps more people will come through as self-learners as a result. But I just see the contradiction, that's all. Yeah.
So, Jim, just a quick question. So would you think that, for instance, YouTube, so let's say if I put the best student on YouTube with the best Harvard, Cambridge, whatever professor who gives the lecture, then that's the best way to teach?
I'm not saying that even the teacher, that schooling should go from first grade to second grade to third grade, should be graded according to norms and certified according to educational principles, that all this discipline should be separated and taught by people who've been trained in those disciplines. That's the problem. Not the fact that different people can't help each other. That's the problem. And that's not something that you can solve with the tools at your disposal. It's a sociological problem, a problem of communication. Yeah.
Also, Chiara, if I may, remembering some dialogues I had with Christopher Craig, and then you understand where the critic comes from. He would probably say that at your university, the students are already economically selected. They are in a very, because it is not a free university, you have to pay. So only a certain class level of students can take part to your class. And on the one side, therefore, I agree with you completely, your effort to make the class to be a dojo in such a way. And I think is for example, what I try to do here in Anzan or Toku, and everything that I as a teacher can do, at least in my self-interpretation. But on the other side, probably also some points of Evandro presentation should be put into the context. But I don't know, what do you think? Christopher Craig is in the back.
No, I think Kim Sensei has something to say.
If she wants to
No,
answer
I'm just
more.
demanding, so don't worry.
Right, so we have time. May I?
Yes.
You what was very impressive, and I was very impressed by many pictures you showed us in your talk. And at the last part of your lecture, you cited the Nishida on the love, and that reminds me of the last phrase of the Dante's Commedia, that love that moves the sun and all the stars. So that's maybe the ultimate goal of the philosophy. And you showed us some pictures that a man is surrounded by the books, and from the book the self is arising. So that reminds me of one dream that I made a dream when I was invited to teach Christian theology in a Buddhist school, Buddhist seminar. I was invited. I went there with our family, and one night I dreamed the dream, and that at the dream, the book shelter surrounding me was fall down. But I did not have any anxiety, any fear. I feel some kind of, how can I say, liberation, or maybe freedom and some emancipation. So seeing your pictures that you showed us, I think the book should not be something that blocking us from me and the world. The book must be some kind of invitation or some kind of windows that we can see the other side of the world. But my question is, so in that sense, I understand your talk. Philosophy must not be something descriptive, something that want to be dominating other people, don't control other people, but rather the philosophy must be some therapeutics to cure. But my question is, how do you or should write the philosophical sentence? How should we write philosophy? Using what style? Using what concretely? How should we write philosophy or how should we write theology? I think you have mentioned many philosophers, and I think your writing sentence is very similar to the writing styles that we are accustomed to, that we used to know already. So can you give us some suggestion then? Philosophy should use this or this writing style concretely. How should I write philosophy or write theology? Can you give us some clue or some suggestion of your ideas?
I think that is the best way to do this is breathing. Breathing. Because if you observe the process of breathing, you step by step construct a different way of seeing yourself and the world. There is nothing more concrete than breathing. It's very curious for me, the tradition of political science or the tradition, for example, of biopolitics, important traditions. I am very grateful there's so many important and decisive things that these traditions bring to us. But I think that is very, very, very decisive to do an effort. That is it. Becomes the most important thing that happens between me and my wife. When we met 26 years ago, he told me, you don't breathe. She told me, we don't breathe. You don't
breathe. You don't, she told him, you don't breathe.
Breathe.
Breathe. Breathe.
We don't breathe.
And I think this communicates with what Chiara was saying as well, right? Starting the classes with like some exercises and breathing. Yeah.
Eu acho que a mente da não-dualidade precisa através da meditação.
What was your suggested, Professor? Philosophy.
My wife is remembering that the Buddhic mind is construction, of course, through meditation. And the meditation is constructed a partir de from respiratory condition. No?
O treinamento da atenção.
Because you can change we can change your mind when you change your attention. No, Kitarō told something about this. You
can train or practice to
the attention.
Yeah,
the attention, because the attention change the quality of will. No?
Chiara Robbiano fala que a mente, essa que a gente...
Can you translate, please?
You're more used to.
Oh, you can translate.
I don't speak carioca.
Chiara Robbiano fala da mente comum. Essa mente comum é onde nós temos o que você falou dos traumas, onde a gente carrega a nossa história.
So, Chiara Robbiano talks about the common From the common mind.
Ordinary mind.
So, Chiara Robbiano, the one of integral yoga, one that my mom practices and teaches and derives her yoga therapy from, he talks about the common mind and how that mind carries the history, the previous talked about Evandro Ouriques, about the wounds that the person carries, your history, the trauma that you carry, all the memories that you have. So that's the common mind.
Isso é o que geralmente fala. As pessoas meditar é estar no presente, não estar no passado nem no futuro. O passado são as nossas dores, os nossos desejos de consertar as coisas, né?
So to meditate is to be on the present, not to be on the past or on the future. The past is where your memories, where your wounds, where the things you carry, the things you want, the things that hurt you. So your needs, I'm sorry to add, I'm adding a little bit as well.
Course, please.
So even for me at the moment, I'm here at a university and then I'm translating what my mom's saying. And then I feel a bit nervous. Why do I feel nervous? Because of all my past. Because of the fact that I'm 24 and I didn't go to university yet by a decision that I made back in Brazil. And then I'm nervous because I'm here in front of you and I'm meeting you for the first time. And you're all scholars. And I feel in that sense a bit distant. You're older men and I'm a younger woman. And I feel a little bit uncomfortable because I want to go to university. And at some point I want to build a career. And I want to do all these things. And I feel nervous.
We don't bite.
We are old,
Yeah, yeah.
but we are less fast. We are old, yes.
How can I stop being nervous? I breathe. And my heart is pounding a little bit right now. So how am I going to my logic mind? How am I going to put my logic mind aside? And I'll just tell my body calm down. That doesn't work. My mind and my body works together. So I'm trembling. Why am I trembling? Why am I immediately stopped? So then that's, from what I understand, that's meditating and building your reality constantly, not wanting to change. I don't want to change you. I don't want to, university has one day to accept me, even if I'm 24 or 26, I want to do my undergraduate studies when I'm 30 and they have to, no, I'm not going to, don't care about that. It does not matter. I'm not going to change the world, and I need democracy, and I need people to understand, and I need people to understand this manner because I came from a little bit a poor neighborhood, not a poor, but middle, a lower middle class neighborhood back in Rio de Janeiro, and I need people to understand me. And I'm a woman, a Latin American woman, and I need people to understand me. Oh my God, please. I need just to calm down. I'm not going to change anybody else. I'm not going to do that. What I can do, and it's very powerful, what I can do is change how I react to things. So this is my situation right now. Do I choose to be nervous? Or do I choose to be what I want to see in the world? How can I want to see something? I want to see peace. I want to see people being happy. I want to see people being happy to be different. I need to be happy to be different. I need to be happy to be myself. I want the world to be okay. I need to be okay first. I want the world to be less stressed. I need to be less stressed myself first. It's not so hard. I mean, it's very hard to not be stressed. It's very hard to control myself. But I cannot start with other. I cannot separate the other and be like, there's me, there's the other, and I want to change. I want to see the change in society. And then I go home and I'm stress eating. I'm stressed about tomorrow. And then I go outside. I'm like, everybody's stressed. We need to calm down. Just so that's what I understand. So it comes from yourself, and yourself changes the world around you because it depends on how you interpret it. And that's very powerful. Breathing.
I'm glad she
Acting.
did the translation instead of me.
But Kim's question kind of falls between what you're talking about. If you talk about personal experience and what you're going through or what you have gone through, and then you jump from that to say that people have to relate to other people by calming down, this kind of thing. Okay, you've jumped to a generalization. His question is, how do you write philosophy? You don't write philosophy by just saying what my personal experiences are. And you don't write them at the second level to say, well, let's talk about non-duality or the theories of non-duality or why we need it and so forth. That's like logical. You're one step removed from reality. And here you're too close to experience. How do you talk about human experience in the world, everything together? Do you use poetry? You don't be argumentative. Do you need political language? You got to be a demagogue. What's the right style for writing about that? It can't be personal. It can't be second level talk about living. It has to be talk about a life in a general way, a general picture of life.
We can talk about non-duality eternally. Non-duality, this non-duality is not this or that, but how can you write down that non-dual?
Non-dual text.
And then how do we deal with talking with generalizations without falling through in
some kind of
prejudices and all this kind of stuff, right?
Exactly.
That's a common for philosophy for
I think
because his suggestion was very creative. So philosophy was therapeutical. That can cure the people. Then how should you like to therapy, to practice this therapy, to cure the people?
I mean, we were talking at lunch about this, and he was saying how if you look at the theological journals and the theological books, they're all essays with footnotes and bibliographies talking about what other people said and criticizing it. But that's, nobody writes philosophy like Plato,
I think I go. I'm sorry. I go back to Chiara's actually. Well, your fourth question, Chiara, was about social activism in class, right? So should we allow it? And then what is it, right? What is social activism? Well, I think we go back to this generalization conversation we're having here, because I was really thinking about it, like what does social activism means, right? And what I thought in this like 4 minutes we had or something, I was thinking that, okay, so social activism are movements that try to understand and deal with the social problems, right? But then I realized that, okay, so someone may think that immigration is a social problem, or that homosexuality is a social problem. So I cannot reduce my answer to this simplification or this generalization of social problems. So I continued in this only like 3 or 4 minutes we had, right? So I continued here without reinforcing prejudices and segregation and all this kind of stuff. But I think it's the same kind of problem we are having here, discussing with how to do philosophy. Because, okay, so we have to deal with generalizations in a way, but how we deal with this without falling into this trap of segregation, prejudices, and this kind of stuff, right? So that's it. And then we go back to what
Yes.
Evandro was talking about democracy and what democracy means and how we deal with, right? Because yeah, that's it. Sorry. Yeah.
Not even prejudice. Argument.
Yeah.
It has to be a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Appears.
entering the discussion.
To reinforce.
Yes, I think it's a beautiful question also because it like together with also the other questions related about the form, because I think there is a big difference from I just tell my opinion. And that becomes the personal and the journal that we are not interested either in class or in a philosophical journal, right? So that's not it. But to be clear about the standpoint. So if I write something, I can write something about what I think that humans should be or should do, or what is a better framework. But I think that one should not like sweep under the rug where they come from in saying that. So I can say, look, coming from this discipline. So also when Jim was saying it's really such a bad thing that we are so like all the disciplines are separated, of course. So let's do interdisciplinarity, but that doesn't mean a soup. It means that I say, okay, as I've been trained as a philosopher and I come from this and this place and whatever it is relevant for this topic that I'm talking about. And I take my cues from, you know, whatever, Donald Duck and Dōgen or something. So I say where I come from. And then I just say, and from this perspective, I tell you this. Because I think that if we do that, then some kind of objectivity in the sense of what results from a dialogue can become something like, then we can look for truth together. Because I have said where I come from, and then you can say, haha, so from there you see this. But then, you know, Dōgen was saying we're all looking at the skies from like through a tube. So I say from my tube, I see this. And then you say, but from my tube, you know, I see something else. And then we can have a discussion. So I think that that is not only personal, but it is also not pretending we are objective. And I think that that's why it's really important to think together. And that is why we should also rehearse that in class. So not to save something which is bad, but like we have this amazing opportunity of having people from different backgrounds. So the one comes from this district, the other one from this other district or whatever. The one has yoga and the other one has not yoga. And now we can try to add like a real philosophical dialogue from there, in which we start saying where we come from, but then we also want to transcend it in dialogue with each other and say, okay, how can we integrate whatever we bring to this class or this meeting or whatever? How can we integrate what we all bring today? And I think that's a great exercise in democracy, and it's also a great exercise in truth.
Thank you very much. Do you want to add something? Or if you want to speak more, feel free. I thought it was finished.
You,
I think,
I don't know.
Oh, no, I
Okay.
disagree with what she said, that you can never write about the world, trying to generalize it, and nobody can read it thinking that it is the truth without taking into consideration all the environment of the person, who the person is. So that cannot be separated. Maybe through maybe if everybody agrees, which is a stupidly hard thing to do, then maybe you can get into some truth.
Gostaria de concluir, né? Porque a gente
And yeah, maybe also finish translating, because I completely interrupt my mother.
Okay.
essa camada, this level of mind, historical mind of we care and we interact more active.
You can say in
Isso.
Portuguese, I'll only translate.
E é uma mente que, ao meditar e ter a respiração, você, aos poucos, constrói uma capacidade de lidar com essas diferenças e também de responder às demandas de uma forma mais amorosa, mais da condição comunicacional do ser humano.
So then through meditation, this previously mentioned the common mind with the history, with the wounds, with the trauma. Through meditation, you can start to understand little by little and promote a loving comprehension of yourself in the world, right? And then also tying up with the conditional, the communication conditional of the human being. And so
this mind, it's the upper mind, the super mind, like Chiara Robbiano talk about, it is not giving us, it is a construct mind. It's a kind of construct mind. The Buddhic mind is not giving us, like the
primary duality.
A duality mind, it's like, como a mãe, traduz aí, como a mãe olha para o filho e tenta entender aquela demanda que é diferente dela.
How the mother looks at a child and tries to understand the demand that is different from her.
Essa é a mente dual em ação, tentando atender as demandas. Somos nós também diante do mundo em qualquer situação de identidade.
This is the dual mind trying to understand the other, and is the one that we have also every day trying to understand the world.
Essa é a mente e a gente tem resolvido muita coisa a partir daí.
And we have been solving many things from that point of view.
E essa também é a mente, vamos dizer assim, do egoísmo.
And that is also at the same time the mind of selfishness.
Para superar tudo que vem com o egoísmo,
to overcome everything that comes with selfishness,
a gente precisa justamente desenvolver uma amplitude de nós mesmos sobre nós mesmos, sobre o nosso egoísmo e sobre a como reagir diante, pelo menos, do nosso egoísmo.
So we need to amplify ourselves. To amplify ourselves to overcome this selfishness within ourselves.
E nesse sentido, essa
in that way,
quando se volta, né, a essa perspectiva que o Evandro traz, né, que esbarra na antropobiologia, esbarra na filosofia, esbarra na religião.
So coming back from what my Evandro was talking about, that goes and connects itself to philosophy, anthropobiology, and many other points.
Nós estamos acostumados aqui no Ocidente a ver respiração como um aspecto biológico.
We are very used here on the West, we're on the East, but anyways, on the hegemonic West, we are very used to seeing breathing as only biological.
E, nesse sentido, a respiração aqui que eu estou colocando, ela é uma base para que a gente mude os estados mentais e, a partir daí, também ela migra de um campo restrito da biologia para um campo filosófico e espiritual.
So what I'm trying to say is that we take the breathing outside of this restricted biological category and then expands it into a capacity of changing, coming from to another, being able to change what you feel, what you make, and everything else, everything that is concrete, not only a biological thing that we should put to the side, but a very powerful
Como a
tool.
Chiara desenhou ali um exercício
Just how Chiara said
de
when
respiração para distensionar, né, para justamente
opening the classes
sair
to
daquela
take off,
dimensão opressiva do medo, da
to
angústia,
relieve
da
all the
ansiedade, enfim.
feelings of oppression, the tension in the classroom and everything. So
São justamente estados mentais,
which
onde
are all
a
mental states
respiração
where where breathing can change.
And it's not only the students, the educators, the teachers as well. Right?
Of course,
The press as well. in a way.
yes.
I come to a room where I have to teach philosophy to 128 first-year students.
If you don't breathe.
Yes. Yeah.
A little,
Evandro, very short because.
yes, very short, of course. Breathing is the membrane between body and mind, no? And between philosophy and the other disciplines, no? Breathing, I think that is the convergence of transdisciplinary and post-disciplinary convergence that opens philosophy, a new manner of do philosophy that incorporates the life as an aesthetic and ethical challenger.
E
And
está
opportunity.
na vida e morte.
Short enough?
Yeah, and then clashes like that.
Yeah, thank you very much for participating, and also thank you to Nakamura-san, Ono-san, and thanks to Gabriela. We finish here and we will meet also next seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.